Welcome to Automate Your Job with a SFDX plugin. Before diving in the forward-looking statement, I'm sure you've seen this 100 times already. As Salesforce is a publicly traded company, please make your purchasing decisions based on the currently available product. And I'm Brett Barlow, a Salesforce engineer at Postmates. I do some blogging in my free time at brettbarlow.com. You can also find me on Twitter at @BrettBarlow. I've worked with Salesforce for the last 5 years or so now. The past 2 have been at Postmates. I have 10 Salesforce certifications, including Platform Developer 2. And I've worked on all kinds of cool stuff on the platform, including a SFDX plugin that I'll be showing you today. So to start out with a little outline of what we're going to cover, I'm going to set the stage with a quick story and then dive into why I built a plugin. We'll be spending most of the time today in the demo, where I'll be kind of showing you some of the stuff that I've done, and then we're going to build one together. We'll recap that with some takeaways, and then finish up with a Q&A. And I've put live demo here at the end because we're all here in this room because we want to automate something about our job, whether there's something tedious or what have you. Be thinking about those problems that you're working on and scenarios kind of as we're going through the demo and the presentation. And if at the end you want some direction or want me to clarify something, I can kind of guide you there. If you have a really specific thing and I've dabbled in it before, I'd be happy to just pop open the editor and kind of show you how I might do that as well too. So let's set the stage with a story. So I started at Postmates back in October of 2017. And within a few months, I ended up with a big text file, a bunch of anonymous Apex that I use to automate different tasks. I can see others have done a similar thing as well. I went to Dreamforce last year, in September of 2018. Of course, coming back from Dreamforce, you're so excited and motivated. You get all these great ideas, and I'm going to do all these things so much better now. One thing that I did was I used SFDX and bash scripts to transform those anonymous Apex scripts that I had and enabled myself as a developer to use the command line to run a single command and do a bunch of work really fast. So this gave me a really efficient workflow. I was able to really focus on projects, and I'd get an ad hoc request and just be able to run one command, and it's done. And that was great. Until fast forwarding more, in January of 2019, Postmates formalized a sales operations team, which was really exciting and all that good stuff. But in terms of my workflow, I now had to think about how these bash scripts were going to be consumed by multiple people because, I wrote the script, I know how it works. When I run it on my computer, it works, of course, right? But now I have to have other people running this as well. And so long story short, I ended up building a plugin around April, and I ended up getting rid of most of those bash scripts that I had because it just did not scale for the team. The reason why I built the plugin, a bunch of reasons, but one kind of funny one is that bash scripts are hard. I had never really done it before. I was learning as I went, and I found really just the underlying point that they worked great when the author was the only one running them because I knew the ins and outs of them. And then now as other teammates started using them, I was getting questions all day about, hey, Brett, how does this work? And oh, what is this actually doing? And so on and so forth. And so I had to go through that process of manually documenting what they did and blah, blah, blah. Finally, people were running commands without the right inputs, so I had to start doing input validation and making sure they're kind of using it in the proper way. While this is definitely possible in bash scripting, it's a little bit more tedious than I was hoping because I had these things that were already working. Now I had to go back and refactor some more. And so there was some pain there on my workflow. And finally, dependency management. While kind of silly, what if someone's running a script that needs SFDX and they're just another engineer in your company that doesn't know about SFDX, but they don't have it installed? How do you kick them back and all of that stuff? So again, handling that in the script or with documentation, a little more tedious than I was hoping. But yeah, so it really just worked great when it was me running solo, but then it totally scaled to the team. So I built a plugin. Why did I build a plugin? Really just highlighting that scaling point. This really helped me to take what I was doing to automate my workflow and expand that so that other team members were able to do that. A big point for me on this was that it had self-documenting features. So the command will actually tell the user what it's doing and how to use it, what inputs it can be given, and so on. I'll show this in a minute, but you can just run --help at any level of your plugin and see kind of what's there. Second, features became almost too easy to implement. Did I need a required parameter? Like that's just a field with a, you can just set required true when you define the parameter, and I'll show this in the demo in a minute. Do I need to call Salesforce APIs, run queries, call endpoints, or what have you? This is all taken care of by what is provided in the SFDX plugin framework. You no longer had to roll these things your own. And finally, modern development. You write this in TypeScript. If you haven't used TypeScript before, it will be painful at first, and then you will not want to look back once you're really working fast with it. It is great, and I'll show some more features of the language in a minute. Second, you can import NPM packages. You don't need to write another CSV parser. Someone's already built that. Just bring that in and use it. And finally, it's testable, so you can use your JavaScript testing framework of choice and go to town. So we're going to hop into the demo, enough blabbing. As a brief outline of the demo, we're going to explore plugin. So we're actually going to hop around the plugin that we use at Postmates and kind of see what's in there. And then I'm going to generate a new plugin. I'll be building one from scratch right here in front of you, and I sure hope it works. And then we're going to add a command to that and kind of go through some of kind of what's involved there. So, all right. To start, I'm just going to run SFDX --help, and this is going to give me some output. If you run this at home and you get an error, go do a Google search for how to install SFDX. It'll take you to the place where you download it, and then get to a spot where this successfully works. So now I'm going to run SFDX PM help. PM is what is the entry point, I guess, to our plugin is a way to think about it. In the plugin language, it's known as the top-level topic. So plugins are structured in a way where they have topics and they have commands. Think of a topic as just a folder for all of your commands, or just a way to kind of more conceptually group your commands together into like domains or what have you. You notice we have some stuff that's technology specific, so BigQuery and HelloSign. We have some stuff that's very Salesforce specific, like opportunity and whatnot. And then we have some more generic stuff. Another one, so record type. So you notice at the beginning, I just ran SFDX PM --help, which just gave me general help. If I run PM record type help, this will now go down another level. And within this record type topic, there's a command that's called get, and it describes a command to get record type names and IDs. If I run help on the command, it's going to show me how to use it. It provides a brief description up at the top, some usage, options that you can pass into it, and it looks like, based on this example, I can just run this and internet, voila. We have all the record types in our orgs, dev names, and IDs. While it might seem trivial, how many times you need to run queries for this, so just simple tasks to automate. A second one that we have that I probably use every day is this one that's called PM User Get. It's a pretty robust command. Now, if you look at the list of options, there's all kinds of stuff that we use to filter by. For example, if I add this active flag to it, it's only going to give me active users. I can run name and stick my name in there. And if I run that, it's going to go off and search for a user by that name. And there we go. It just gives you some fields. Maybe you don't need that many fields. I added this skinny flag, just kind of pares it down to the kind of core fields that you might need. And then finally, how many times do you need to export user data for whatever reason? I have added output CSV. It just dumps it to a CSV. Just right here. So comma-separated values right there. So just a couple of really simple examples. These two are more just getting stuff out of the org. I find my team and I get a lot of asks to actually work with data at scale, and it's very tedious to open up the data loader and go through all the mappings and do all this stuff, especially when it's just I need you to update all these records meeting this criteria to this new state. And I built a plugin to do that within data. It's called data set value. The best way to demonstrate kind of how this works is by example. So it accepts, not authenticated on stage. Here we go. So it accepts 3 parameters. The first is a query parameter. You notice I'm just selecting ID type from account where it has some type, and it just gets the first 5, just as an example. In real life, you're going to be actually selecting the records that you want to update. The second parameter it takes is a field. What field do you want to update? In our case, we're updating type. In real life, you might be moving a bunch of accounts to some new owner or updating some custom field or whatever. And I'm going to put the value very cool company in there. And you notice that I just did this in production, and I'm not afraid to do that because a feature of this command is that it will store those records that you queried into a backup file for you. Because how many times do you do these uploads and then the business comes back and says, oh, I didn't mean for you to update it to very cool company, I just wanted some other value, or not those accounts, these accounts need to get updated. So the backup is actually stored right here. So we just updated these real accounts in the org to the one not with the backup, to very cool company. So, oh, whoops. Hopefully no one's actually using those records as we're doing the demo. But so I can just run using the base commands that are available with the SFDX package, force data bulk upsert. I'm just going to dump that file back in and update those 5 records to be back to a good spot. And one more data one before we move into actually building a command. Let's do merge. Merging records is very tedious, right? You can do 3 via the UI, 1 at a time. At one point, we had a project where we were merging thousands of accounts down into 1, sometimes tens of thousands of accounts. And of course, to do that, we wrote some scripts to make that really easy. And so this is the command that we use for that. It's just called merge. And the help shows you some options that you can do. The first is by just a list of, so I guess naturally you need to define the object type. You can actually only merge account, contact, or lead. In the plugin, if you define another value in this field, it's going to kick it back and say you can't do that. You can only pass in these 3 types. It's actually an enum type in TypeScript that we'll get into the code in a minute. But so you pass the object type, and then you can either just give it a bunch of IDs, it'll just smush them all down, or you can give it a name, and it's going to merge all the 7-Elevens down into 1 account. Or you give it a search. My copy didn't work. There we go. Or you give it a search like this, and it's going to go ask the org, hey, what of that record do I have in here? And it's going to show them on this list, and you can select and merge those records. I'm not actually going to do this because now I'll really be messing up some data, but you can actually prompt the user for some input before the command proceeds. And that's just done with an NPM package that's already made available. So those are some examples of the commands that we have. Let's get into actually building a plugin. So I'm going to run this command that's called SFDX plugins generate. When you install SFDX, you get this plugins topic, which has a series of commands that are available to you. One of them is generate, and I'm just going to accept the defaults here so that I can kind of talk as this is kicking up. The generate command will do all this stuff that's happening on the screen to like build you a plugin that is working, and it has an example command in there. And there's a few other commands that are in that generate topic, including things like install, update, uninstall. So if you publish a plugin, your coworkers can run install with your plugin name, and they can get it, for example, and that's how we manage that. And so now we should have a folder that is df19, and it has these folders in it. And so I'm actually going to open, I'm one directory too high, cancel. Idea dot. So if I just open, nice. df19. And let's just do it this way. So I'm just going to open, IntelliJ is just mad at me. That's fine. Gotta love prompts that are hidden behind other windows. And so if we actually just open this up, and let me make this bigger because this is going to be really tiny for people in the back. Zoom, please. No, not make smaller, zoom. Great. Actually, the stuff on the side is as important as what's here in the middle. So we'll make that part big. And let's open the terminal. So when we ran the generate thing, you saw on the screen it like built all this stuff up, right? What you end up with is this file structure that's on your left. I encourage you to kind of take some time when you're at home to kind of see what's in there. But what you also get is this sample command, which is hello org. And it does all this stuff. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But if we run it, SFDX hello org from right here, actually doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because we need to run plugins link. So this plugins link command is kind of a magical command. If you are in a folder or directory that contains SFDX plugin, like we have here, it's going to link the source code that's in all these folders over here to the command line, which will allow you to run the commands without the plugin actually being like published and out in the wild and all that. So for those in the front, you can see that this is printing out hello world. This is org Postmates with an org ID. So that's great. So now we have something working. Before we dive into actually messing with the plugin, I'm going to update my folder structure slightly to set us up to enable this to scale to additional topics. So I'm going to make a folder under commands that's called account. And then I'm going to, so this means we have commands, we have hello, and we have commands account. Below here, I'm going to make a folder that is called df19. Remember, we named our plugin df19 at the beginning, and so similar to how in the Postmates one we have the PM, colon, data, colon, whatever. It's important to have that entry point because it makes it easy for you to add additional topics, and you can layer things much more naturally. So if we just move account into df19 and we move hello into df19, we now end up with a messed up folder structure. Looks like I didn't move those correctly. Oh, maybe it's just because we have one command here. Hello, account, yep. Hello is within account, that's what it is. The IntelliJ navigation thing is not always the best for this. We want it like this. Oh. Ta-da. Nice, much better. So now we have df19 as our kind of top level topic with account and with hello below it. And I'm just going to make a file in here that is called get. And as any good developer does, I'm literally just going to copy and paste this right on over and make this bigger. And so now if you notice, those in the front can see up at the top we're within df account get as the command. Which means if we try to run this thing that we did earlier, which was just hello org, it says, hey, that doesn't exist. And the reason why is because we're linked to the folder that we're in, and now that we've changed the way things are all set up, we need to run df19 hello org. And so if we run df19 hello org internet, there we go, it does actually work, which also means we can run df19 account get with success. So this is a pattern that we follow where you have your top level topic and then you can kind of build out from there. As you can start thinking about your use cases, you're going to end up with many other topics below this like first level. And the one folder structure like this, df19 to account, there's no limit. You can continue nesting if you need to. I actually find that I only go one level deep. But it depends on your use case, I suppose. So to talk about the command, want to start with kind of a quick tour, and then I'm going to sketch out what we're going to build, and then we're going to build it. Up at the top, we're importing some different modules. You'll notice that these come from this @Salesforce package. If there's one thing you should do after this is you should explore what's here in these packages. There's so much good stuff. Like if I just click into command There's this like UX package that has, oh, I can log stuff or, do spinners and errors, all kinds of things in here. If you go into core, again, there's just all these modules that are in here. Oh, what's, this org thing? That sounds important. Oh, is it a dev hub? Oh, that's there. Get the username. Like literally just, you can spend hours probably clicking around in here and seeing all that kind of just comes with the package that you don't need to go out and figure out how to build. It's just all there for you. The second thing that comes in the little demo command is this messages capability. What this allows you to do is within a messages directory, you have a JSON file that does like key to message string so that you can share messages across commands. Personally, I don't use this at all. I find that the messages that I show and use within my commands are specific enough to them that I haven't had to share them. And I'll talk about an example of throwing an error with the message in a minute of why I actually just kind of type them into the command itself. Next, we get into the class. So you're exporting a JavaScript class. This one's called org because that's the name of the sample command. The convention that I use is account get. And so this is topic, and then command. This makes it really easy if you're this actually helps your editor do more work for you because you can find things. Class names is one thing that editors really commonly key off of. So if you're trying to search around for something, do take the extra 2 seconds to just rename your class to like something a little bit more natural for you to find later. And it extends this SFDX command class, which gives you all kinds of magic. The first thing within this class is a description. Remember how earlier I mentioned it's self-documenting? This is where that starts. So instead of this messages thing, I'm going to say that this is a command that gets accounts by name. You can just type that in there, which means that when a user runs help on it, they're going to see that message. So no more, hey, Brett, what does this thing do? Because they can just run help and see what it does, as long as you're documenting that. These examples, you can provide an array of examples to show them different ways that they can use the command. I highly recommend to include working examples in here. Notice earlier when I ran set value, I can actually use that to update real records on the fly. So think of this in the frame of someone who's not used any of the commands before and they want to practice. So you can add like -- target username and have it run on some sandbox org, for example, in your examples. But so let's do SFDX df19 account get -- name is not a real place as an example command that they can run. Next, this args allows you to work with arguments that are passed after the commands run. It's handy. We're not going to use it here, so I'm just going to clear that out. The flags config. This is one of my favorite things about the whole SFDX plugin because you can very, very easily add parameters and define their shape, their requirements, document what they are, and all of that. This is something definitely worth exploring in more detail. We are going to have a flag that is also called name. For formatting's sake, I'm just going to put these down like that. You can define a shorthand for it. So let's just keep n, meaning someone can just do -n, or they can do -- name. So either way, the description, I'm just going to say this is the name of the account to find. Cool. What if I need to make this required? It's that easy. Required true. And if I run this without it, it's going to kick me back. Within this flags, like you notice it's flags.strings, flags.boolean, what are the capabilities of that? Oh, we'll just click into it. And down below, boolean, enum, integer, arrays, dates, like literally I have not looked for something and found that it was not here. They've met all my needs with the types that are built in. They're documented on, online as well too, but I find it pretty easy to just get to it from the node module. We don't need this force thing anymore, so let's remove that. Next, so these 3 flags before we get into the actual meat of the command. The first one is requires username. This is awesome because if you set this to true, it means that the person running the command must run it against a Salesforce org. So if they run it against a Salesforce org, auth is taken care of for you. You can do updates, queries, all of that, and that'll all work. You don't need to worry about OAuth flow or any of that good stuff. If you run it with requires username true, you're in good shape. You don't need this though, because you'll find that you'll write commands that don't always work with Salesforce, but you want to keep it within the same utility. And so it is an optional parameter, like we can just remove that and we can just run the command without an org. But I tend to leave it on 9 times out of 10. And finally, these 2 down here come into play more in like the DevOps style examples. If you need to work with a dev hub or run it within an SFDX project or whatnot, those will be handy there. We don't need them today, so I'm just going to make us some room and clear those out. So our command now, it just has a description, and it has some flags. It requires username, and if we run help on our command, we have, it says here, gets accounts by name. It has our option of name, and it says in parentheses that it's required and describes what it is. So just like that, like you can just save literally right here, and it reflects in the command line instantly. No more build pipeline and all of this stuff. You can just like really quickly hammer things out. And so finally, getting into the actual run function. There's a lot of good stuff down here that they're doing, which is pretty neat. Again, kind of demonstrating the like changing stuff as you go. If we just save that, this is now, or I don't want to run help. If I just run this command again, oh, I didn't pass help. Nice. Let's run our example. So if we run this, and I just change the string to Dreamforce, this is going to say, hello, not a real place, because we passed the name, and it's required true. If we flip required back to false, we can actually just pass this without a name. And then instead of hello, not a real place, we're going to get hello, Dreamforce. So really just stressing that you can just make these edits on the fly really, really fast, which makes it like a great developer experience. I encourage you to explore what they've done down here afterwards. I'm going to type out a to-do list of what we're going to build. So the command that we're going to build is just going to go get accounts by name from the org. Very, very simple. So the first thing we need to do is build a query string. Second thing we needed to do is run the query. And then the third thing is we're going to log the results. So again, like any good developer, I'm going to see if there's something I can borrow that they've used. Looks like they actually have a string down here that's a query. So let's steal that. But I'm going to change this slightly because we don't need to query organization. At the front of the variable, because remember we're in TypeScript now, we can define the type of the variable within the declaration. And the syntax for that is variable name colon type. String equals 2. No, it's mad at me. I can't do that because 2 is not assignable to string, where 2 string is just fine. Simple example, but I highly recommend that you leverage the features of TypeScript. It will slow you down at first, but it is going to prevent bugs in the future. So let's select ID name from account, where name equals this.flags.name. So what I'm doing here, this.flags is kind of magical. This.flags just gets you any of those input parameters, and how you get them is by the full name of the input parameter. So seems pretty simple. You just do this.flags.name, .foo, .whatever you put in there, and you can just get the value just like that. It's pretty easy. So that's our query. So we're going to run the query, and oh, it looks like they did that down here before too. So let's borrow some of this stuff, but let's play around with it a little bit. So first, they're doing this org.getConnection. This will get you a connection to that org that they're authenticated with, which they're required to be authenticated because they have requires username. Within get connection, this is something that you should do. Go and explore all of the great stuff that's in the connection class. As an example, there's a bunch of Apex stuff. Let's go post to, I don't know, this endpoint, and let's send it foo bar. And if we await that at the beginning, we just posted to a REST endpoint that we've made in our org with some data in one line. You can do literally all kinds of stuff. You should really explore what's in that connection. If we have time at the end, I'm happy to talk about some more specifics there. But continuing with this example, they've defined an interface of organization. An interface in TypeScript allows you to define the shape of an object and work with it more strongly typed. And so let's just rename that to account. And account's going to have a name. It's also going to have an ID. And we can go query out those accounts like this, and that works. But thinking about this, we're probably going to use account all over the place in our commands, and we're going to need that same shape. And I don't want to copy and paste this everywhere, and what happens when I add fields, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm actually going to cut this, and under commands, I'm going to make a new folder under commands. I'm going to make a folder that's called shared. And within shared, actually I want this up one more level. Source, here, I'm just gonna get rid of this real fast and get rid of this, cool. Commands, actually that's probably fine. So within shared, we're going to just make a TypeScript file. Let's just call it typedefs. And I'm just going to paste that account, and we're going to export it. So this means now that we have an interface that's an account, and we can export it and import it from any command that we need. So if we add some other custom field, you can just add it here and use it everywhere. So this is mad at me now, but we can import this from shared.typedefs. So this shared folder is something that will be your best friend as you scale this thing, because they're going to have all kinds of reused interfaces as one really specific example. But what if you need to always parse strings in a certain way or do stuff with numbers, or you have all your utilities for stuff where there's not a package available that you can just npm install and get it. That shared folder will become your best friend. And so we can just query the org by running this, and we have our interface that's defined over here. Finally, let's log out the results. So when we call connection.query with that query string, we get a result object back. They've already done the work of parsing out some of this, so I'm just going to steal that. And if within that result object we have a records key and it has some values, or it doesn't have some values, sorry, let's throw an error that says no accounts found with name this.flags.name. Again, helping the user because you can show them the input that they gave you within your error message. This is an example where the messages pattern actually kind of breaks, where you're importing those shared messages, because how do you parse variables into them and whatnot. I find it less complex to not use that, and then just easier on your side on a developer to just toss it in here. So if we don't have any data, let's throw an error. But if we do have data, let's put it in this accounts variable as an account array is how you're defining that in TypeScript, which is equal to result.records. And so from here, let's just do accounts for each. Count. And then this .ux has all kinds of capabilities. I showed a little of it earlier, but you can do just logging output to the UI and say, I don't know, ID is account dot ID, and we have that because we defined that interface. You're helping your editor help you. And let's just do name is account.name. And let's see if we can get rid of this and see if the red will go away. It's always hard to do these when you don't have your kind of preferred editor configuration. But despite all the red, let's see if this actually runs. So down below, I'm running df. No, shared type defs not found. Notice that we at least, so funny enough, it'll still run your command, right? Because you gave some input. It bailed out because my import was all messed up. But we hit this error because, of course, in our results, like we didn't have that. And so it showed down here, no accounts found without this name. Let me see if I can figure out why this is mad at me. Oh, maybe it's up here. Count, we don't use this. We don't use these. We're using flags. And sometimes with these plugins, you just kind of got to play with it a little bit until it cooperates. df19 account get. Let's try to just use the interface within here. I think I know what it is. One second. Shared within commands. Yeah, okay. I did mess that up. So within this folder is where we want type defs, not here. Okay. One moment. And did that find it correctly? I think I might have lost some of my imports, so I'm going to go and restart those three from here. All right, so that did run successfully. So I still got an error, but it ran successfully. And this is actually my expected output, because we don't have an account in the org with the name not a real place, but we do have an account in the org with the name Burger King. And so if we run that with Burger King, we do get the output ID, whatever, name, whatever. So this is another good lesson in like making sure your folder structure is all straight and your imports are good. But the point stands in just being able to architect your commands in a way to where you can share the kind of reusable pieces and also give interaction back to the user along as they're running the command. So we got the error when one wasn't found, and then we got the actual output when one was found. So with a little bit of time remaining, let's go through a couple of takeaways. So first, use the language features of TypeScript. I showed that pretty briefly, but the little colon type will help you in the long run. You'll be slow at first, but again, it's going to help to prevent bugs. That shared directory is going to save you tons and tons of time. It also, because it's more modular, it allows it to be tested a bit easier because you could just test your string utility. You can just test, whatever it might be. Definitely explore those Salesforce packages. If there's something that you're looking to do with the plugin, they've probably already got a way to do it. You don't need to roll your own anything. What I've found, it's either going to be in there or it's going to be in an NPM package somewhere. You can just pull it in. What I didn't cover testing. Testing is great. You should definitely do it. Pick your framework of choice and go to town. We use Jest because we also just use it with LWC. Enable the plugin to be installed. So we built this great thing to just show an account name. Well, kind of silly, but what if my colleagues want to install it? How do they do that? There's a command that's plugins install, and you pass it the name of the plugin or a few other ways to install it. But the user that's trying to install it must be able to get to it. So if it's in a public repo, that's easy, they get it. How we manage it internally with our private plugin is we just keep it in a private GitHub repo. And then we give other employees access to that repo when they need to get it. And finally, how do you deploy changes, right? So we've got this thing out in the wild now, and you need to update version or add new commands or what have you. How do you get those changes to your users? There's a few ways to do this. Yarn has a bunch of ways. We use Yarn Publish and kind of hook that to a few other kind of build scripts to change versions and whatnot. But I would explore doing that. And there's also a lot of good examples of how to do the deployment in the open source plugins that are available. So what should you do when you get back from Dreamforce? Run SFDX plugins generate with your little company acronym or what have you, and just push it up to wherever you host your remote source, GitHub or what have you. And just get it up there and tell all your teammates, hey, I learned about this thing that can help us save time and automate our jobs. And start taking note of those repetitive or tedious tasks. It could even be something as silly as just showing the record types. Like you don't want to go query those anymore or get users or what have you. Or it could be something like really sophisticated like we do with our lead scoring and our Google BigQuery work. Writing commands for the tedious things is going to save you time in the long run. But another interesting aspect to this is that we're all human, and that if you have a command that takes 10 steps and we fail step 3 and step 6, the command is not, the task is not completed successfully. Right? But if you write a command to automate all 10, it's always going to work. So that's just something to keep in mind as you scale. And finally, get inspiration from the open source community. There's this link on GitHub that's awesome SFDX plugins. It shows all the open source ones there. There's a lot of good work that people are doing in the community. My personal favorite's the work Shane's been doing. It's a full suite of tools at this point now. He does all kinds of stuff. Personally, when I'm approaching a problem and I don't know direction, I go here and kind of look at what other people might have done, see if there's something I can use that they have that just works and I'm good, or I can take inspiration from their approach and apply that to what I'm trying to do. So it looks like we only have about a minute left, so I can take maybe one question, but happy to stick around afterwards to do more Q&A. All right, well, if we have no questions, thanks everyone for coming.